you keep going back to the census report, and actually I want to ask you, based on the numbers of the census, like what does it tell you about the health of the church as a whole?
Okay, let's start with the positive, right? The positive is that a lot of traditional religions, the numbers are going down. They've been going down for a couple of census. So just for those who don't know, that every 5 years there's a national census, or what is called a general household survey that's conducted. And every 5 years they track certain numbers. One of the good things we know for, as far as us as Christians goes, is at least we're not dipping in growth. But we have slowed down in growth for sure. The peak years of growth in the 70s and the 80s and part of the 90s, in the 2000s, 2010s onwards has noticeably slowed down. So we're not at the other side of the mountain yet, but our mountain seems to be plateauing, right? There are segments of the faith in Christianity which are growing okay. And I think we don't need a census to do that. You just need to look at certain churches. Certain churches clearly are growing, and we bless them. We celebrate with them. We think it's a good thing.
But a lot of them are also inter-church movement, right?
It is. And the problem with going too far down that thought process is, I don't want to be too critical of churches. I think it's just important for every church to just consider, if that is the situation, what realistically can be done to address that issue. Right. Meanwhile, for the churches that are really, really growing, I just want to celebrate with them. I mean, they're doing something right. We can raise all kinds of concerns about them, but at the end of the day, it's just based on, like, would I rather see people who are saved in the kingdom, albeit not perfectly, whatever, theologically aligned, etc., etc.? Yeah, yes, I would rather. I think the first benchmark we look at really is, are people saved or not? Right? Then the depth of discipleship, the kind of Christian they are, the number of verses that they can spout out when you whack their head, that kind of thing. I think those are important, but those are a next level against which we are judged. It's the same as in the end days. The end times, we are judged firstly, is our name in the book of life. That's the most important judgment call. After that, we give an account of our lives, even as believers. Right? Demographically speaking, there are these pockets, segments, or individual churches or denominations that are doing well. But broad demographics, it's not the prettiest picture. The highest proportion of Christians is in the 45 to 54-year-olds. So 18.9 is the national benchmark. The 45 to 54-year-olds is in the 20+%. Everyone else is below 20%, and below my age group, right, which is for you to guess, but I'm about twice your age, I think. Below my age group it dips significantly below that, and it keeps going down and down until the 24 years old. Below that age, I think we assume a lot of young Christians are still in church as a family situation. So we can't guess too much about the very young Christians.
You can't confirm it's a personal faith, but more that they're being dragged by their parents.
Correct, especially since the survey, the methodology is they conduct it as a household. They ask one person in the household, are you all going to church? So the father may not know the specifics of the son's faith, for example. But anyway, so that's too technical for us. Broadly speaking, what does the census show us? One, the younger you are, the more likely you are the younger the age group, the more likely you are to be below the national average of Christians, right? So if national average is 18.9, the younger you get, the more likely you are to be below that figure. And if you can track it year on year, every 5 years when the census comes, it actually shows that people are dropping out of the faith in those age groups. So we're not talking about natural attrition, which might be happening at the 80-year-old mark or whatever. We're talking about people who 5 years ago said that they were Christians. Now you ask them 5 years later, I'm not so sure. That's really what the census confirms. Another awkward thing that the census floats up is the idea that Christianity is prevalent among certain demographic SES slices. And I don't know how sensitive it is to say these things, but it is statistically proven. The percentage of Christians who are better educated is far above the percentage of the national average of education. The percentage of Christians who stay in 5-room flats or higher is almost double the rate of for the national average, right? On one hand, that's wonderful. Wow, God has blessed us. On the other hand, it does mean that while we are receiving the blessings and all that, are we becoming a little bit more of an exclusive group, a homogeneous group? If you are largely of a certain race, of a certain economic status, you speak a certain language, how well are we doing then in all the other demographic slices? The other races, the other language spoken, the other economic status. Will we, how well represented are we there? Are we able to communicate with them when it comes to outreach, discipleship, or even just good witness? I think these are deep concerns which will have serious ramifications on the growth of the church, on the depth of the church in the years to come.
Now, this is so strange, when we talk about how Christians tend to occupy the higher SCS classes. When actually, at the very start of Christianity in the 1st to 3rd century, Christianity was popular only amongst the slaves, among the crippled, and among the dying, whereas we see
because they had nothing else.
Exactly. And because the church was very intentional in loving the least, the last, right, and the lost, do you think that is an issue with our modern day church? The fact that we have so much resources, and at the same time, we are not, seeing that kind of impact in the other stratas of society.
As a church leader, there are 3 things that are typically hard to mobilize a church to do. One is missions. Of course, missions because of all the ministries, the cost is the highest. Right, we're really asking for people to uproot. I mean, there's all these in-between shades like digital missions and all, but generally speaking, the cost is highest. So that one's kind of understandable, but it's still a very tall order. The second one is mercy work. And we're talking about mercy work, we're talking about the long-term, deep, pour out your heart, constant sacrifice kind of mercy work. I think everyone has a certain degree of almost like mercy tourism, feel good. Once a year we go and do this at that nursing home. Once a year we go and do this for our community services wing. And that's nice and it's better than 0 times a year. But if you really ask people to really get their hands dirty and really invest life in that part, very, very difficult. Although, of course, many churches, and I'm not going to paint church with a very broad brush here. There's many people and many churches who do a very good job on this front, right? Generally speaking, though, it is hard. The third thing that is getting increasingly hard for a church leader to get the church into is evangelism. Why? Because firstly, the second generation issue. I've never had an epiphany moment. I don't know how to translate that for someone else. My salvation has never weighed on me so heavily. Because if I'm a new Christian, that would have weighed on me at some point. I had to give up my old life for the new life. Whereas as a second generation Christian, I never had to give up anything, so to speak, right? I mean, we do, but not to the same degree. Give up my entire mindset about eternity, etc. So if we don't have that conversion experience, evangelism goes. Also, evangelism makes demands on us that increasingly we just don't like being uncomfortable with. Things like putting ourselves out of our comfort zone, talking to people about this, that, and the other. Things about risking being unliked because you are saying something about a God that some people just don't respond very well to. It's funny though, because Jesus was very, very clear, the world will hate you because of me, the world will. But Jesus was also very, very clear about the commission that despite that, it still needs to be done, right? And the book of Acts, which is the clearest example of people heeding God, they heard God firsthand. We're talking about the apostles and those who saw him, and they knew that was of utmost importance. So I think that's a struggle here. The early church, as you pointed out, was for those who were really in need. Those who, they needed a savior because on every other front, no one was going to come to save them. But now we have so much to fall back on, whether it's economy, whether it's, father, mother's money, whether it's, in Singapore, we'll survive one, won't die one, you may not get a job you want, but got something, the safety net's very strong. And what happens to us then is we no longer are asking the deep and the real question, and the ultimate big question is, what is my purpose in life? And you and I know, hopefully, that the purpose in life is to know God and glorify Him. To know Him, to serve Him, to love Him. And one of the most important ways to love and serve Him is to bring other people to Him, right? To boast about our Lord Jesus Christ. I worry that as a increasingly second generation church, we don't have that same passion, we don't have that same urgency.
So do you think part of the reason is that we are not thinking as a generation about the deeper questions, the more important questions like what is God's purpose in our lives. And that keeps us, in a sense, like cruising while doing the right things in church, and then we kind of like don't get beyond that.
Two parts. One, I'm sure there's many people who aren't asking those questions, and I think the way Singapore society is set up, it's easy to not ask these questions. You know, education puts you on this treadmill, and then there's certain career paths and so on and so forth. The other one is, I think there'll be people who are asking, but they may not be prepared for what God might really be saying to them. And it's not a blame thing. Part of it is partly because, well, that's how the whole church does faith, for example, and that's how the people around them. Or maybe they take certain reference points, whether it's the internet or certain heroes of their personal heroes of faith, and that becomes their reference point. Whereas we started right off by talking about the direct relationship with God, and being able to parse, being able to hear directly from God what exactly He wants of my life. I'm going to bring in a slightly different factor here, which is now I'm a father, and any minute now, I think, that's why my phone is here. Sorry, I have a phone here because I may or may not get a call from the hospital or the gynecologist for my wife. But anyway, as a father, I think I've come to realize the really important role that family plays in building up a healthy faith, shall we say. Over the years in Thirst on Light, we talk to missionaries. We talk to missionaries about what would get more people into the mission field, etc. And one of the things that constantly comes up is the struggle they have dealing with family objections. And so we talk about family objections, we're like, oh, okay, maybe the family is not Christian, maybe the family is... But they are typically, right? Typically. We're such a second generation church now. But these second generation, so the first generation, the father, the mother, they are all for, oh, son, you must go for Sunday school, son, girl, you must, marry a Christian man, that kind of thing, right? But when it comes to, you want to go where for Jesus? Right?
Uganda,
right? Yeah, Uganda, be kidding me, right? So we have this real issue here, and that's just the extreme example for missions. I think there's a lot of fathers and mothers, and I'm just putting myself right there in the demographic, who may be doing their kids a faith disservice by painting a wrong or a confusing picture of what faith is. On one hand, saying you got to trust God for everything. On the other hand, the actions of my life and the enrichment classes I send you for and the response I give to your grades suggest that maybe you should trust on something else, whether it's your 补习老师 or your ability to study 8 hours a day, or Red Bull, at 3 a.m. during your O levels, or whatever it is. Maybe you should trust that more. You should trust God. Of course, it works hand in hand. You must still study. Nothing wrong with that. So I think there's a part that I don't know if any fathers to be, mothers to be are going to watch this, but we really have to live out that faith. We really have to live it out, and it is so difficult because I apologize to your generation on behalf of the fathers. It's so difficult to be a faithful, faith-filled, faith-exemplifying, faith-embodying Christian 24/7. And then what happens with generations that get stumbled? I try my best, I preach in church, I come home, very tired, I snap at you. That's your picture of God. That's your picture of the faith. It's so difficult as a father, as a mother. And that's where all of the tensions in the faith comes from. And slowly out of that, again, going back to second generation. This is why there is this is why I worry a lot about people like yourself and whoever might be watching who comes from that faith background.